everyone, it's Alpha Queen and welcome to a brand new series. I've always been interested in doing Mario Kart Wii content on the channel, but there's always been one big issue. I like the content on my channel to be relaxing, easy to watch, calm, and my Mario Kart Wii gameplay is just quite the opposite. It's hectic, it's chaotic, there's no structure whatsoever, and that's why I save it for Twitch. I'm not exactly great at the game, and I'd say at best I'm probably below average. However, in more recent times, a certain series on YouTube sparked my curiosity and made me wonder if it was genuinely worth getting better at the game. That series was Mario Kart Wii Bootcamp by ArcIntel. There are videos in this playlist covering topics as basic as the rocket start, ranging all the way up to competitive play. I'm pretty lazy when it comes to practicing and trying to get better, and I'd say 90% of the time I play is on stream. And when I stream, I focus more on entertaining than I do getting better. I needed a decent excuse to play the game, almost in a way to make it productive, so here I am, turning my learning trajectory into a series on YouTube. And where better to learn from than Arc series? As far as things I'd like to get better at, I'd say shortcuts is definitely top of the list. Not only can they potentially save a big chunk of time, but they're also pretty cool too. So I bundled up a list of shortcuts, and my plan was to go through them in chronological order, making the first shortcut on that list the Mushroom Gorge Gap Jump. And in doing so, I gave Arc's video on this a brief look, and all was going well until I saw this.
The third method is basically the normal method, just with a Spindrift.
A what?
The Spindrift.
I thought my knowledge on drifting was pretty okay, but honestly I don't think I've ever done a Spindrift before, or at least not on purpose. Luckily, Arc does also have a bunch of videos on drifting, so I guess that's all start. Perhaps there's a lot more to drifting than I originally imagined. To me it's as simple as turning on manual, going around a corner, charging up a mini turbo and releasing a boost. It seems pretty simple, but in this playlist, there's more videos covering this technique alone than any other technique in Mario Kart Wii. Though it does seem like his most recent take on the topic is split into 3 different parts: entry, charging, and exit. Let's start off with entry drifts. And if you're interested in following along with what I'm doing, I will link everything down below so you can join in too. Oh yeah, yesterday I jumped into a bunch of versus races just to see how my current drifting technique compares to what I'm about to find out. I did 8 with Daisy Mockbike, and for the sake of experimentation I repeated the same with Funky Flamerunner. Oh, and I had custom tracks turned on too, so that'll be interesting. So a bit of context, these techniques seem to apply to inside drifting bikes only.
First, the most important thing to know about drift types is not all drift types are the same class. I think a lot of people get that confused. You see, a drift constitutes of 3 different parts: the entry, the alignment, and then the release. The entry of the drift can be either a slip drift, a spin drift, a delay drift, an 08 drift, or a ski drift. Then, while charging the mini turbo, you could do either a soft drift, a hard drift, a fail drift, a mixed soft drift, or a mixed hard drift. Then, for the exit or the release of the drift, you could either do a follow through, an insta wheelie, a chain drift, a human turbo, or a task turbo. Hopefully I'm not forgetting anything.
One thing the Arc doesn't mention is that you can have drifts with a characteristic from each property. In fact, my understanding by looking at this table is that every drift takes 1 property from entry, 1 property from charge, and 1 property from exit.
First, an 08 drift. An 08 drift gets its name because this was the drift everyone used back in 2008. How you do an 08 is by pressing the drift button at the same time you input a direction on your control stick. After 2008, players ditched the 08 and began doing delay drifts, which is the most common drift that you'll see players use online today. Instead of pressing the drift and inputting a direction at the same time, you'll instead want to input a direction after you press the drift button but before your character touches the floor. As if you input a direction too late, you'll drift lock it.
I'm not even going to ask what a drift lock is. Arc mentions the delay drift gives a better alignment for most turns. I actually use the 08 and delay drift methods actively today, although I don't actively vet which method works best. Though I think my logic is, if I know the turn well, I'll pretty much always delay drift, and if not, I'll pretty much panic and press the drift button and the direction button at the same time, which is an 08 drift. And that's the case on, I'd say, most custom tracks.
The next drift down is the slip drift. A slip drift is done by pressing the drift button while in a pocket of air. Obviously, this is not possible on flat track, so yes, that makes this drift a bit more situational, but it is a faster way of taking a turn as you spend less time in the air.
I think the slip drift so far is the easiest thing to do on this list. Landing from air, I'm imagining this is the same situation as if you're landing from a ramp, and then going straight into a drift is not too difficult, I don't think, if I'm interpreting this correctly.
When people learn about different drift types in the game, I think the first one that most people gravitate toward is the Spindrift.
Aha, there we go.
And I honestly don't know why.
I don't know about you, but the first drift I gravitated towards was whatever would get me around a corner. If anything, this is hopefully the last drift I'll need to learn.
How you do a Spindrift is by starting with an 08 drift. Then while your character is still airborne, you're gonna tap the opposite direction on your control stick, preferably as quickly as you can. What this does is it makes your character tilt a bit more in the opposite direction that you're drifting. So if your alignment is slightly too close to a wall or corner, you could spindrift around obstacles.
So what you're telling me is that this is mostly a protective measure?
Like that. Also, it does have another niche use case. I'm talking of course about the Mushroom Gorge gap jump. Due to the way that bikes tilt in the opposite direction of what you are drifting, and bikes when they drift, they naturally lean over, what this means is you'll get a bit more air than you normally would, making certain situations like the gap jump a little easier.
Okay, so it is good for certain shortcuts. The shortcut at the end of BC64 might even be even more helpful than the Mushroom Gorge one since it doesn't need a mushroom.
Speaking of recovery tools, the last type of entry drift that we'll be covering today is the ski drift. Drift the opposite direction of where you want to go, then quickly drift back to the original direction.
So this is just a realignment tool, but I do like how the wheels don't lift off the ground. And that's it for the entry drift section. Let's see what the charge drift section is all about. Hopefully this gets simpler.
There are 7 unique angles on every controller.
Or not.
The first charge drift, also known as a hard drift, is the angle on your controller farthest to either direction.
Okay, this is fun, and you'd use this for any tight turn.
Next up, probably the most elusive and complicated drift to a lot of newer players is the soft drift. How you do a soft drift is by simply putting your control stick to either the top or bottom 45-degree notches on your controller.
I don't know if I'd call it elusive. It does make sense that having a softer angle on the control stick would result in a softer turn, if you will. But now that I think about it, I don't really hold the controller stick in one position. I go back and forth a lot, maybe side to side, depending on which way the vehicle looks like it needs to go.
The third drift, and also the final unique drift we'll be covering today, is the fail drift. I'm sure you've all done it before. You enter a turn too tight and you instinctively either don't hold the direction or hold the opposite direction of what you are drifting. Despite its reputation for really only being done by bad players,
a fail drift can involve holding the opposite direction to what you are drifting. I have a confession to make, okay? It's a bad habit that's been engraved in my soul ever since Mario Kart DS. For those that didn't play the game and are not familiar with the term snaking, it basically involves pressing the left and right buttons on the D-pad very rapidly, and that will charge a mini turbo in Mario Kart DS very quickly. I may or may not do the same thing when I drift in Mario Kart Wii. So does this mean that all my drifts are fail drifts now? I am a failure.
the fail drift actually does have use cases.
I'm not a failure.
Normally in situations where getting a mini turbo quickly isn't the highest priority, but you still need to get a realignment.
Maybe I'm just half a failure.
So quick recap, for turns that are fairly sharp, you'll normally find yourself using a hard drift, and for turns either slightly duller or to help you get a better alignment, you'll be using soft drifts. But what about those turns that are too dull even for the soft drift? That's where the mixed soft drift comes into play.
There's more. Okay.
A mixed soft drift is a combination of a soft drift, sometimes a hard drift, and a fail drift.
So maybe this motion is actually not a fail drift after all.
However, even though it is a combination of the two, it's very important to understand that we are not randomly tapping back and forth on our control sticks. The correct input for a mixed soft is a soft, fail, soft, in that order. Why it's important to do it in that order is a soft drift charges the mini turbo much faster than a fail drift. So when you're right about to release the mini turbo, you want it to charge as quickly as possible right before it releases, to give yourself less chance of a misfire and not getting the mini turbo.
Or not. So it seems like this is the motion that you need to do, but what if you need to turn more left or more right? Can you press a directional button again after that, or does that just become a fail drift? Do you add more inputs and turn it into a half soft fail drift? Turns out you can mix hard and soft fail drifts depending on the occasion. And that brings us to the end of that video, so let's take a look at the final stretch, the exit category.
The first, and also the most common exit drift we'll be looking at, is the insta-wheelie. It's done exactly as it sounds. You input a wheelie by pressing up on the D-pad or shaking your Wii remote up as soon as the drift ends and the mini turbo starts. Insta-wheelies require a lot of muscle memory and just raw practice.
Probably not the best idea as someone who has neither.
Now if you're planning to play online a lot, I want you to take what we just talked about and throw it out the window. Okay, don't actually discard it, you'll still be using insta-wheelies quite a bit, but the next exit drift, the follow-through, is generally a much better idea when in tight packs. How you do a follow-through is instead of getting a wheelie as soon as the mini turbo starts, you'll want to use that time you're still in the boost to get a realignment. Then wheelie a bit later, but not too late, you have to still be in the boost.
I think this is pretty much all of my exit drifts unless I'm going into another drift.
If you ever watch test runs of Mario Kart Wii, sometimes you may notice instead of doing a follow-through on certain turns, Ghost Records do a hop realignment looking thing into a wheelie. This is called the test turbo.
That technique looks beautiful and you get pretty much no air from it, but the timing's probably incredibly strict on that. I do this quite a lot where I just hop or drift a little with air to realign, but I guess that's less TAS human and more regular human.
The last exit drift we'll be covering today isn't really an exit drift. You know how I said if you do a drift into another drift quickly enough you'll get low air? Well, that's the basic idea and principle of what a chain drift is. By releasing, then either buffering a chain drift with a wheelie or with fast timing, you could link drifts together over long spirals or turns.
This technique is actually one that piqued my interest when I started looking through my footage. I always thought a chain drift was one where your tyres didn't leave the ground at all, but that looks very different to what I'm seeing here. Without specifically trying to pull this off, I managed to do this with Daisy maybe once or twice every race, but with Funky Kong I think I only managed to do this once out of all of my 8 races that I did with him. I wonder if the timing is different with different vehicles, or maybe once you get to know a vehicle it's easier, I have no idea.
Heads up though, it's a frame perfect trick, which because Mario Kart Wii runs at 60 frames per second, you have a window of 1/60th of a second to input a proper chain drift.
So it looks like it's 4 frames regardless of what vehicle you're in. Maybe it's something in my bones that just makes the timing easier for me with the mud bike. And with that, that's everything. It's pretty neat to be able to put a name to all these techniques, most of which I didn't even know had names, and it's reassuring knowing that the ones that I need online I can mostly pull off. It's also good to know that doing a soft or hard drift without too many fail inputs will make you charge your mini turbo a lot faster. There's just one thing that I can't do yet.
The Spindrift?
So let's jump into the game and see if I can pull this off. I initially tried doing this on Luigi Circuit, but there was a problem that rose pretty quickly. I actually couldn't see any difference in how the character's head or vehicle moved, despite feeling like I was doing the inputs correctly. After about half an hour of frustration, I moved over to BC3, where I could actually practice on a lot more turns. I thought possibly a more productive way to test the difference would be to do one run where I don't spin drift on any turns, and then another run where I attempt to spin drift on all the turns. Then I can compare the two and see if there's any difference. Okay, so I've slowed everything down by 2 times, so you can sort of see them a bit clearer. But honestly, I just don't see any difference with the head movements. They look pretty much the same to me, and I've been staring at them for a while now, so I'm not really sure what I'm doing wrong. I think I followed everything correctly, so I don't know. Any suggestions, leave them in the comments. I can't be bothered to set up my tripod and everything, so I'm just going to film the outro like this. But I feel like this was somewhat an unproductive end to an otherwise half-decent video. I don't know what I'm doing wrong with the Spindrift, and I don't really know what to do from here. There is a very small chance I did it correctly and I just couldn't see, but I doubt it because in the videos that I watched, you can somewhat see a small difference in how the head moves. So I'm not sure, and I don't think I can press the directions any quicker than I already was. Other than that, it has been interesting to look at all the drifting techniques and, like I said earlier, be able to put a name to everything. I did do this whole video with the intention of learning how to spindrift, or at least knowing what a spindrift is. So at least I know what it is, I just don't think I can do it. I'm not sure if that's a very good conclusion or not. The reason I did this is because the spindrift is one of a few methods that you can do the mushroom gorge gap jump, and if it's not 100% necessary anyway, then I think I'm at peace with not being able to pull it off, or at least not consistently. But yeah, like I said, if you guys have any suggestions on how I can do it properly, then please let me know, and hopefully if I do get any suggestions, I might even make a follow-up video. But for now, I think that's everything from me and from Funky sitting below my headphones. So with that all being said, if you made it to the end, thank you all so much for watching and have a great day.